welcome to episode 2 of the Octagon Cleaning and Restoration podcast series. We're going to talk really briefly about kind of my personal hobbies and what I do in my spare time, what Brad does in his spare time, and then we're going to get into the weeds of kind of what separates Octagon Cleaning and Restoration from kind of the herd of companies out there that are in this industry that provide the same products and services, but oftentimes very different results. So I'll start with just asking you, Brad, what do you do when you're not living and breathing Octagon?
It's all focused around home.
Yeah.
So as you know, I go straight home. I call my mom twice a week. She's down in Pennsylvania, and I call her twice a week. I'm very much routine, go home. I love spending a half an hour sitting on the couch with my wife and our 2 dogs, and we talk a little bit, have dinner, then we go on with our evening. I love working around the house too. We bought a 90-year-old home that needs a lot of work, and unlike the people that work for us, like, tools are not good in my hands, so it takes me a long time to get everything done.
Yeah.
But I take my time, and I enjoy making my home better and bringing back an old home that was neglected in the past. As soon as it gets warm, a little warmer out, I have a nice bass boat that I got myself as a treat, and I love going fishing. And the outdoors is one of the reasons why I originally moved to Maine, was the outdoors, and just where I live is beautiful.
Yeah, there's no
now.
shortage of outdoor spaces here.
It's a lot of people don't appreciate, like, I didn't grow up in the state, so I appreciate it, I feel, more than a lot of people who just grew up with it. And but the rest of the country isn't always like that. I think we're blessed up here.
Yeah, I would agree
with where we live.
Yeah, and in my spare time, I dabble in real estate endeavors. It's one of my business hobbies aside from Octagon. I love the outdoors. I spend a lot of time fishing, hiking, boating. I'm an avid aviator. I actually was flying helicopters earlier this morning. It's my passion. I've got 2 boys. My oldest is 23 years old. He runs our Fairfield, Maine office. My youngest just turned 16, and he is a part-time employee, works in the summer for the company, and he's a great worker, good kid. I spend a lot of time with family, recreating, trying to do as much as I can do to spend time with the loved ones. One thing you can never get back is your time.
Yep.
So
100%.
Family kind of means everything to me as well.
Yeah. And you have your man cave too.
I do. I have my man cave, and actually that would be an interesting segue here. Being the owner of Octagon and being in this business for 23 years and being a certified indoor environmental consultant and knowing better, I'm a little embarrassed to admit this. I started seeing a functional medicine doctor several months ago because of some just odd symptoms that I had. I ran a whole blood panel, did a microbiome panel, and one of the things I found in my blood work was high levels of aflatoxins and mycotoxins from aspergillus exposure, which didn't seem all that unusual given that I'm in an industry where I'm surrounded by mold and contaminants on a regular basis, but the levels were concerning and certainly anomalous for what I do every day. And given that we're geared up and using PPE in the majority of our exposures. So I started to investigate, where could it be coming from? We actually ran an air test in our shop, which came back fine. Ran an air test in my home and found that I had almost a 9,000 count per cubic meter of Aspergillus penicillium-like spores in my basement. Nothing visible in the basement. The visual mold and visual inspection was actually clean. It's a really clean basement. I have a climate-controlled basement. I've got a geothermal system that provides air conditioning down there in the summer. Have really good humidity controls, and it is a finished basement, but it's finished with all non-cellulosic materials, and it breathes pretty well, except for the fact that I had vinyl plank flooring on my basement floor. My furnace had leaked 2 years ago. Had it replaced about 1.5 years ago, and the water was mitigated that I could see. But what I found after I dug into it is that the water had traveled in a path that I really never would have expected and really didn't identify. I was a little bit complacent, not going to lie, a little bit complacent, thinking that, I had all the humidity checks in control and I mitigated the water that I could see. And I didn't catch that the water kind of went out and around and sprawled out across my floor. Long story short is the furnace was replaced. It leaked again about 3 months ago, and it was a relatively minor leak that I caught quickly, had rectified pretty quickly. But after doing this air test, I dug in and found that there was really extensive mold growth underneath my vinyl plank flooring, which is all vinyl. It's waterproof, life-proof flooring.
I think that everything about it says no mold,
Shouldn't
right?
mold, right. And mold will not grow on that vinyl plank flooring, nor will it grow on your concrete flooring, which had a urethane sealer on it and a really good vapor barrier on the concrete. But what it will do is grow on that biofilm that it consists of dust and pet dander, because I have 2 wonderful dogs that love the shed, and pollen and just all the normal contaminants and biofilms that are in the air that settle on horizontal surfaces. And there was enough of it present between that concrete and that vinyl floor to create quite the petri dish of mold. And I work out down there on a regular basis. I play pool down there with my father and friends and spend a lot of time in the basement. And the result of that, I'm sure, given that it was 9,000 count per cubic meter in a static environment, while working out and actively moving around on the flooring and on the workout mats, I would be willing to bet those counts were probably exponentially higher than that. And it resulted in a pretty serious exposure. And it resulted in me having to get my hands dirty in my own basement and perform kind of an unscheduled remediation. And I've got the basement put back together now, which is nice. It's better than ever, but it can happen to anybody. It's not just something that happens to our customers. It's something that I've lived twice now in my 23 years in this business. The first time was in my former home while my wife was pregnant with my youngest child. We had a furnace that had a steam pressure valve let go, and it was a basement that you wouldn't want to spend time in. So we weren't down there very often, and I didn't find out until we started to experience symptoms. So I mean, mold can be a pretty serious thing.
Yeah.
It can be a pretty serious hazard and contaminant to even people with a healthy functioning immune system. So I take what we do quite seriously. And I have some personal experiences that give me a whole lot of sympathy, concern for our customers, and that really have reinforced my belief that you have to live that creed of do no harm, and we have to follow the procedures and protocols, because what you lack with the mold remediation industry, and I think it's a shame, you lack regulation. You have standards, you have guidelines that are industry standards and guidelines put out by industry organizations, but you have virtually zero state or federal regulations on mold. I think the furthest you're going to go is OSHA when it comes to worker safety. Yeah. When it comes to how you actually execute a mold remediation job, it is the Wild West. It truly is the Wild West. There's nothing that says a company has to do things by the book. There's nothing that says a company has to do things the right way. And there's nothing that says a company has to complete that job to industry standards. And the industry standard is set by the IICRC, and it states that the mold levels post-abatement should be to a standard where there's no visible growth present and airborne concentrations are similar to or less than the background concentrations in the outdoor control sample.
Your control.
It is very subjective. And if you don't have a qualified, competent, ethical, third-party industrial hygiene consultant that's doing that post-remediation verification, there is no guarantee that you're getting a job that's done right. And there is no guarantee that your exposure and potential health is safe. Like,
yep.
The only way you're going to know is by educating yourself and by insisting that you have the proper safeguards in place to make sure that the job is being done to industry standards. It's one of the things that I have committed this company to doing is making sure that we are exceeding or at minimal meeting industry standards and guidelines on every job. And it is oftentimes up to us to self-police our own work. And it's for a variety of reasons. In a perfect world, you would have a third-party industrial hygienist put together a prescriptive remediation plan based on a visual assessment, based on testing, based on protocols, based on science. And then we would come in and just step by step follow that prescriptive remediation plan. And then they would come in on the tail end and verify that we have followed that scope. That happens, I would say, maybe 15 to 20% of the time.
I was going to say 20%.
Yeah. And unfortunately in this industry, a lot of the companies doing industrial hygiene work and post-remediation testing are oftentimes more concerned with maintaining a relationship with the remediator than they are with protecting the health and safety of the client. And that's another area where I think that state and federal regulations are sorely needed to protect the client, protect the end user, and to make sure that everybody is doing the job to the same standard. Given that, it comes down to us as me as the owner, the project management team, the branch managers, the general manager, self-policing to make sure that these jobs are being done according to IICRC standards and that we are leaving the client with a safe, healthy home that's returned to a condition 1 environment, which again, a condition 1 environment is free of mold growth and has a mold spore count that is similar to or less than the outdoor control sample. If you've done that, you've done your job. But to ensure that that happens, it requires having an ethical contractor, and it really, in a perfect world, should have a third-party industrial hygiene consultant do the post-remediation verification. And it should be somebody that is scrutinizing every nook and cranny of that project to make sure it's done properly. Because even the best remediator doesn't catch it all. Case in point, my house.
Yeah.
You know, like without testing, I would have thought my basement was fine.
Well, without testing, it's a lot of it is visual.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So. It is a lot of it's and with an assessment. I mean, a proper indoor air quality assessment is largely your visual inspection, your moisture meter, your findings. But testing is there to either validate what you're seeing visually or to find what you may be missing during your visual inspection. And I would say that 90% of the assessments out there that are done, you know what you're dealing with after you've conducted that assessment. It's that 10%, like my house, that you do an assessment, everything looks copacetic, and you look at the air test and you're like, wow, there's something way off here. And you know, the first thing you do is you want to find out if it was, you know, was it a lab error? Was it a sample mix up? It shouldn't be if you're doing your chain of custody right. Or did I miss something? And if you miss something, I mean, it's imperative to go back and dig a little deeper.
Yep, you got to dig
and find out what that source is. And I'll tell you, in my case, like it was humbling. It was very humbling to have it happen in my own home. And you know, I'm kind of on the mend now through a variety of you know, sauna treatments, exercise, and supplementation. It's quite the intensive detox process. I've actually got an appointment later this afternoon to redo some of that blood work to see what kind of progress I've made.
And different people have different reactions.
They do.
To mold.
Yeah, and I do not have, based on a variety of testing I've done over the years, I don't have any abnormal sensitivities to mold exposure. But when you're exposed, it's all about the dose. When you're exposed to a high dose for a long duration of time, virtually everybody's going to hit a threshold where they're going to have some type of reaction. You know, for me, it was just fatigue. It was a little bit of brain fog, and it was just some really subtle, but also, you know, anomalous symptoms that just weren't quite registering as normal with me, and I knew something was off. And I've seen those symptoms kind of regress and improve quite a bit over time. Good. So Brad, let me ask you, what do you see as different with Octagon versus the competitors that we see out there?
Well, you know, I'll just go back to my background, and what drew me to our company is the customer service, the level of customer service. Yeah. You know, and I think that, you know, we do a pretty good job at listening to our customer, you know, finding out what's their goal, what are they looking for. You know, it's more than just walking into somebody's home, seeing that they have mold on a certain wall, taking care of that mold. Sometimes there's deeper questions, and then having those conversations, we could properly let the customer know, the homeowner, what level of concern they really need to have. Some people get very concerned very quickly, where they don't need to have as much. It's a smaller issue, and then vice versa too. So I like the time that we spend. I like our reaction time. I like our ability to get out. We don't charge for those estimates. We get out quickly. We make it important to us. And the turnaround time is quick. So when a customer wants to go, we're ready to go.
Right.
I think from a whole customer service standpoint, I think we do a very good job.
Yeah, I think there's always room for improvement.
Well, of course.
I agree. I think we do a pretty good job the vast majority of the time.
Yeah.
And when we don't, we recognize it, fix it, and course correct immediately.
Yeah. And then of course the level of service, as you're discussing, it's like there's multiple different ways you can get a job done.
Sure.
Some are better than others.
Yeah.
I love that we take the high road.
Yeah.
We do the right thing, even though it's harder.
Yeah.
Right.
It's tough. Just for an example, I think, like, I'll shoot it out there with an attic. Let's use that as a good example. An attic is kind of a part of the home that really doesn't have a big impact on indoor air quality under most conditions. You have to have some really anomalous conditions for an attic to impact the air quality of a home. It's more of a structural concern. The attic's more, if it's built properly, it's more of an outdoor space, really. The moisture and air in the home is exiting through the attic, and it should be exiting through a proper ventilation system. So more of a structural concern, less of an indoor air quality concern, I would say, normally. But an attic, there can be huge discrepancies in price and scope. If I look at some of the competing estimates that I've been able to observe over the years, I've seen everything from going in and just spraying a chemical and painting it white. Hate to break it to you, but if it's painted white, there's a reason. There's something behind it that they didn't want you to see. An attic shouldn't be painted white unless it's been tested visually and through surface testing to be visually and scientifically under a microscope cleared to be free of mold growth. At that point, if you want to paint it white for some odd reason, go ahead. But when I see an attic painted white, the first thing I do is scrape a little bit of that paint off to find out what's behind it. Inevitably, unless it's a fire damage where they did it for odor, inevitably there's mold back there that was just painted over. And if that happens, there's going to be an issue again if the underlying cause is the ventilation, the air sealing issues were not addressed properly. But the difference between doing that, which you could do for a very minimal amount of money and time, it's a one-day spray and go approach that's not getting to the root of any issue. It's just literally painting it over. Versus doing a proper prescriptive approach to an attic, which would involve source removal, cleaning the roof decking, removing the insulation in a lot of cases, air sealing, improving the ventilation, and getting the attic re-insulated to code, and having it tested to make sure that it actually is clear and free of mold growth for resale purposes and to preserve your property value. The difference between those two scopes is oftentimes several $1,000s. But the difference in what you're getting is substantial. You're getting a home from Octagon that has a 5-year warranty that is absolutely going to be done the right way. And if there is recurrent mold growth, we will come back and take care of it, fix it. We'll redo the entire job at no charge. Whereas the other approach, there's a guarantee also. There's a guarantee that if it's painted white, that you're 100% going to have mold recur. And that's not a guarantee personally that I would want to offer to a customer.
No, that's a bad guarantee.
Yeah, I would say it's a bad guarantee. One thing that I think is noteworthy with Octagon is we do offer free inspections. Yeah. And it is a differentiator. A free inspection is not a mold assessment. Depending on the experience and the background of the project manager, you may be getting more value than you would get from an indoor air quality assessment, depending on who's doing the indoor air quality assessment, or you may be getting substantially less, but you're getting a quality inspection that's going to result in one of two things. It's either going to result in an estimate for mold remediation and recommendations for corrective steps to prevent recurrence, or it's going to result in a referral to a third-party industrial hygienist. There are many things on a free inspection that would trigger a referral to an industrial hygiene consultant. If there's anybody that's experiencing health issues in the home, that's a serious trigger for us to refer a third-party industrial hygiene consultant to that client. Like we're normally not going to put together an estimate without having an industrial hygiene consultant come in there and test the air, do a proper assessment of the home, and really put together a prescriptive remediation plan for us. That does a number of things. It first and foremost ensures the health and safety of the client. It ensures the job's going to be done properly. It relieves Octagon of some liability in having to try to guess at what might be going on in terms of airborne burden in the home. And it just provides a lot of assurances to the client that they're getting a proper remediation. And if they have the post-remediation testing done, which is absolutely critical if there's indoor air quality concerns, then it assures that our job was done properly. And I will tell you, like having done thousands and thousands of these jobs, that there are many jobs that I've walked through that look perfect or as close to it as you're going to get. And, there's still something in the air that needs some additional air scrubbing or additional cleaning that we missed based on the visual inspection. Or even that we didn't miss, that just you're dealing with a microscopic organism. I mean, you can have millions of mold spores on the head of a tack and not be visible to the naked eye.
It's invisible. And we're going after something that's invisible.
We're literally trying to clean and remediate a microscopic organism in an indoor environment, and it's not easy. But if you follow a process and you follow best practices and industry procedures, you can provide that client with a safe, healthy home. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about, is making sure the job's done properly.
Yep. Yeah, good.
So, yeah, that's a lot of information, a lot of talk back and forth. I guess in your parting thoughts, Brad, what would you like to offer?
I would say that mold in general is something that I wasn't concerned with in the past in my life. I didn't think about it much. And if I saw it, I probably wouldn't even have recognized it. I think that the longer I'm in this industry and the more I talk to people, that mold seems to me has a profound effect on a lot of people.
It sure does.
In different ways. And it's not as scary as it was before I started. Yeah. Because now I know there are ways to take care of it and to take care of it properly.
Yep.
And I think we give a great vehicle to get people started on that by just with a phone call, we can show up. It doesn't cost them anything. And sometimes we walk away and say, you're all set, and sometimes there's work to be done. So I'm glad that we do the things we do because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I would kind of take off on that and just state that, I don't know the number, but I'm going to guess that I have overseen, managed, or been part of probably tens of thousands of mold and indoor air quality projects over the years. And I have seen 3 situations. 2 of them were actually medical professionals that have had lungs removed due to aspergillus, aspergillus growth. Aspergillus, certain species can actually develop growth structures in the lungs. A couple of those were not treatable. They ended up having to have one a full lung and one a partial lung removed.
No kidding.
And I had a very not cavalier, but I didn't have the level of concern that I have today as I've evolved and grown in the industry. This was pretty early on in my mold career. It gave me a really healthy level of respect for customer safety, for industry protocols, and for our employee safety. Our employee safety is a huge concern, I know, for both of us. But mold can have pretty serious consequences to even normal, healthy people. And especially when you have people that have autoimmune issues, that have Lyme disease, that have complications from COVID, all of these type of things can cause synergistic effects with mold exposure and can really wreak havoc on your immune system. So I think there's more importance today in this world we live in, with pollutants all around, with glyphosate in all of our foods, with all of the toxins we're exposed to on a regular basis. Like, our systems are overloaded. And I think maybe the level of toxicity that our bodies can handle is probably a lot less today than it was in the past. And I think, therefore, the importance of our industry and of companies that do things the right way is probably more than ever. And I think you're building homes tighter and tighter as well. And the tighter you build a home, the more VOC exposure you're going to have, the more likelihood you're going to have ventilation issues, moisture issues, and the more important it becomes to ensure that you have good indoor air quality. And at the end of the day, I think that's our mission, is to serve our community, serve our customers, and make sure that we're doing no harm all along the way.
Yep.
So, yeah, I would say that pretty much is a wrap for
Sounds good to me.
episode 2. Appreciate it, Brad.
Thank you.